everyone, sorry for the long wait, but here's another commentary. This time, it's a double feature on a ranter called Kross who made 2 rants on Steven Universe Future, that I found to be a little disagreeable. This one covers the first 6 episodes, and this one covers the first 10. That's all you need to know, so if you're not afraid of Steven Universe spoilers, let's get started.
So much of the dialogue in the first few episodes is mind-numbingly boring. It consists of nothing but Steven and whoever the fuck just talking about the situation everyone is in and basically just completely transparently setting up the plot. This is not only about as subtle as a frying pan to the face, but it also reeks of uncreativity. Just show us the situation instead of having the characters talk about it.
So ignoring how you don't really show any examples of this, keep this complaint in mind, I'll get back to it later.
Steven is overpowered as shit. He was always basically Jesus, but at least in earlier seasons that was because of circumstances and plot armor. Now Steven is literally just invincible, and he even knows it. He only seems minorly annoyed at the prospect of fighting Jasper, and that was before he unlocked his pink Super Saiyan mode.
If you're going to claim that Steven was overpowered before he turned pink, maybe you shouldn't show footage of normal Steven being pinned down by Jasper. If he was winning the fight effortlessly until Jasper pulled a plot-contrived turnaround, then that would be one thing. But that wasn't the case. Before he goes Super Saiyan, Steven threw one punch that Jasper wasn't fazed by, and spent the rest of the fight either running away, dodging her attacks, or getting curb stomped. How does any of that make him look overpowered?
Speaking of this new power, it sucks ass. Like I said, it makes Steven even more overpowered than he was before, but specifically it grants him flight, super strength, and seemingly complete invincibility. As a result, none of Steven's altercations are exciting at all because I expect him to easily solve the problem at hand.
First off, I think you're overselling how powerful Steven's new form is. In the fight with Jasper, every bit of damage he does on her is either something she can shrug off, or was so minimal that she was still able to laugh while being attacked. Secondly, Steven always had super strength. Sure, you could argue that this pink form enhances his strength, but that makes it an extension of an ability he already had. Thirdly, you're saying that this power makes him seemingly invincible? Where? Your footage doesn't show Steven shrugging off damage like it's nothing, since Steven's just fighting Aquamarine and Eyeball, which doesn't prove the invincibility claim, since they were established to be a low-level threat at best.
Oh no!
The only moment that comes close to showing invincibility is when he caught Jasper's attack, but blocking one attack does not mean he's completely invincible. And finally, you're using the fight with Bluebird as an example of Pink Steven killing the tension, when the fight wasn't meant to be tense in the first place.
Well, it's us! It's always been us and you never knew!
I always knew. Everyone knew.
The biggest drama in that episode was when Greg had to cut his hair. Steven told him to go inside in a very morkish and overdramatic way.
Father, go inside.
And even when he does turn pink, he reverts to normal about 10 seconds later because their childish bickering caused him to stop viewing them as a serious threat. This fight had about as much tension as a run-of-the-mill Team Rocket battle, so there really wasn't much tension to kill in the first place.
This is made even worse by the fact that his new powers go completely unexplained.
You remember how she was, with her destructive powers throwing tantrums left and right? She had a screen that could crack the walls.
Pink Diamond's old Pearl flat out said that Rose had latent, destructive abilities that happened whenever she threw a tantrum. This even happens in the scene you're showing footage of.
The Pink Saiyan mode seems to only happen when Steven's under emotional stress, but it also seemingly activates when he's just kinda uncomfortable.
I mean, being uncomfortable is a form of stress, especially since the thing that was causing this distress was to mention that Rose's actions led to yet another problem Steven has to fix.
Stop it! I can't deal with one more horrible thing she did, okay?
Which even the original series established to be some pretty heavy emotional baggage that Steven has.
Maybe that didn't matter to you as much as hiding from the mess you made. And that's why I'm here, isn't it? Did you make me just so you wouldn't have to deal with all your mistakes?
So this is a lot more than just being kind of uncomfortable.
I don't know what the scene with him turning pink in front of Rose's other Pearl was supposed to imply, but all it accomplished was confusing me and throwing a wrench into this new ability.
Oh, stars! What a misunderstanding. This is all Pink Diamond.
Mom?
sorry. It's just baggage.
Kross, he clearly turned pink at the mention of his mother doing yet another horrible thing to someone. How is that supposed to signify anything other than Steven has a hard time dealing with his mother's past mistakes? Also, you previously complained that the show's dialogue was spending too much time telling the audience what was happening instead of actually showing it, but when they do rely on visual storytelling, then suddenly it's a bad thing that they're not explaining it? Make up your mind! Anyways, after this he complains about how Smokey being able to move at the speed of light was never explained, which, yeah, he's not wrong on that, and he goes on to say that the show's tone was inconsistent, which I also agree on, so I'll just move on.
Steven is incredibly inconsistent with his characterization. One moment he's a normal teenager who seems to be of at least average intelligence, and the next he somehow can't understand that he's positively reinforcing Onion's bad behavior by being nice to him as Rainbow. One moment he's laying out all the perfectly logical points to why Jasper should come join him in Homeworld Land or whatever it's called, and the next he's agreeing to fight her.
That's not inconsistent, and your own footage shows why. Steven was getting angrier as the conversation went on, and Jasper was not only pushing his buttons, but was constantly stating that she wouldn't serve weaklings and even challenged Steven to fight her.
Listen, weakling, you might have Pink Diamond's gem, but you are not my diamond, and I am not going to take orders from some weak, sappy, useless piece of dirt. If you think you're hard enough to tell me what to do, then fight me and prove it.
So obviously, Steven would try to fight Jasper as a way to get her to join the modern world since he refused to listen to anything else.
One moment he's completely emotionally stable, and the next he's losing his shit over finding out Pink had anger issues.
I can't deal with one more horrible thing she did, okay? One more horrible thing she did, okay?
Yeah, it was just because he found out Pink had anger issues, and not because it's yet another dark secret that Steven feels like he needs to fix. Not like the show ever addressed that before.
This one specifically is really dumb because giving Steven outbursts of anger would have clearly led up to this moment naturally, and it would have been the easiest thing in the world to do. Steven had plenty to be mad about, but it was this moment that they decided should be the straw that broke the camel's back. Again, tonal whiplash.
Mom? But this is not about me. We're gonna get you fixed up, and I know just the Pearl to help us.
You're just like her.
No, I'm not like...
It's such a shame what White did to her.
Doesn't matter how it happened. What matters is finding a way to fix it.
What did you say?
Pearl, no.
I just happened to be standing too close to her that time, and...
Doesn't matter. I'm gonna fix it.
There were several times throughout the episode where Steven was uncomfortably trying to dodge any conversation about Pink Diamond's past because he was extremely uncomfortable with that topic. These were signs of anger that Steven was clearly trying to suppress. And if I can go back to your earlier complaint about the dialogue...
So much of the dialogue in the first few episodes is mind-numbingly boring. It consists of nothing but Steven and whoever the fuck just talking about the situation everyone is in and basically just completely transparently setting up the plot.
These are moments where they're using the character's actions to show the story rather than verbally explaining it to you. So if you're wondering why I showed all of these clips, it's because they actually go against two of Kross's complaints with the show. So after this, he talks about the Steven-only perspective and the visuals, and then he ends this rant by saying he'll make another video on the show if he saw something interesting, and lo and behold, that's what happened.
Steven Universe has been home to quite a bit of controversy for quite a long time. Many people absolutely love the show, and many people absolutely despise it, and while I can sympathize with both sides, I find myself a little closer to the latter category. I don't think the show is terrible by any means, it's just that almost everything it has which appeals to most fans doesn't resonate with me as much, and that means that its flaws are all the more apparent to someone like myself.
It's still fun to bitch and complain about all the stupid shit that happens as the episodes keep coming, and in keeping with that spirit, the remainder of this video will be dedicated to me listing the numerous specific problems I had with what I've seen so far. So who's ready to piss off some Steven Universe fans? Let's do this.
Yeah, forgive me for thinking that the statement feels a bit hollow.
Steven Universe's writing quality is easily its worst attribute if you ask me, and I think this is because it attempts to tell a compelling overarching story that requires lots of plot points in order to progress, despite also making each individual episode its own self-contained experience. This is not at all helped by the fact that each episode is only 10 minutes long. As a result, the show creators have to cram a lot of plot points into each episode and keep the show moving at a fast enough pace to hit all of them, and they indeed do this.
Do they really throw a lot of plot details at you, though? A lot of the episodes are actually pretty light on story. Episode 1 is just, hey, the crystal gems are in a school now, and Steven tries to get Jasper to enroll. Episode 2 is just Steven putting the homeworld gems into careers they're not comfortable with, throwing the town into chaos, and undoing the mess he made. Episode 3 is just Steven having an uncomfortable dinner with the other rose quartz. Episode 5 is just Aquamarine and Eyeball messing with Steven. Episode 6 is literally a joke episode disguised as a safety PSA that has nothing to do with the plot. Episode 7 was just a character bonding episode episode where the characters play tag and learn a lesson about change. Episode 8 is just Steven and Lapis trying to convince other Leslies to stop destroying planets. And episode 10 is just Steven raising a living cactus, neglecting said cactus, and having to deal with the inevitable monster of the week. I'll admit that episodes 4 and 9 have a lot going on, but if it's only a problem with 2 episodes, then I seriously doubt it's a problem with the whole show.
The issue is that because of this pacing and some problems in the show's developmental process, which I'll get into later, they are prone to finding themselves into situations where they have to strain the audience's suspension of disbelief in order to keep the episode rolling. For example, in the episode Volleyball, Steven, Pearl, and Volleyball go to the reef where they hope to heal Volleyball's cracked eye. Steven has a little freak out, and the room's AI seems to determine that Steven's distress is due to Pearl and Volleyball and decides to rejuvenate them, basically setting them back to factory default. And Steven cannot do anything to stop this. When presented a scene like this, I'm sure most viewers were left unfazed, but personally, I could not stop asking questions. Why can't Steven stop this process? He's a diamond, and he's clearly been shown to have the ability to influence this reef place multiple times now. Why did the AI decide to rejuvenate Pearl and Volleyball right now instead of the moment they entered the reef?
Because Steven wasn't freaking out when he entered the reef. Steven was yelling at the Pearls to shut up about his mom, and the AI misconstrued that as the Pearls behaving badly. As to why the AI didn't listen to Steven telling it to stop, don't you think that could just be because it was never programmed to stop a rejuvenation? After all, Pearls were essentially make-order slaves back when Homeworld was still around, so why would they bother programming a feature that would help a defective Pearl? If I may interject, my diamond. What happened to Miss Strawman? She had more important things to attend to. But anyway, wouldn't the factory have to assume this was the case, prove Kross's point about how the show relies on the audience suspending their disbelief? Well, that's the thing. He's acting like you'd have to come up with a huge conspiracy theory to justify what's going on in the scene, when the example I brought up only relied on focusing on one aspect of the lore, the reason why pearls were created, which was heavily tied into the existence of the reef to begin with. So saying that the scene strains the audience's suspension of disbelief is, ironically, a huge stretch on Kross's part, since you wouldn't have to think that much to justify this scene. And that's ignoring how this scenario...
Why did the AI decide to rejuvenate Pearl and Volleyball right now instead of the moment they entered the reef?
Is immediately answered by Kross himself.
The AI says that for pearls exhibiting problems this severe, rejuvenation is required, but does this mean that the AI wouldn't have reacted if Steven was a little less emotional?
So you acknowledge something that proves your last question faulty, and then just forget about it like you never asked it in the first place. But even then, yeah, if Steven told the pearls about this calmly, the AI wouldn't have reacted that way, but why is this a problem? The freakout still happened, and if a diamond was blowing up at her pearl like that before Steven reformed everything, then it would make sense for the AI to want to rejuvenate the pearls if it believed she was causing a diamond that much distress. The situation isn't that hard to understand, so I'm left asking what's the problem here.
I know these seem like nitpicks, but these kinds of moments happen a lot throughout the show, and when they're all stacked one on top of the other, they start to really strain my suspension of disbelief. Other examples include, why does Steven run away from Garnet, Pearl, and Amethyst when they're trying to get him to play Steven tag instead of just letting them tag him and not shapeshifting?
They'll never stop until they make me play.
Because they're bugging him, and they won't stop bugging him until he wins the game. This was even mentioned in the episode.
Why does Cactus Steven only repeat whatever is most narratively convenient for the gems to hear while they're fighting him?
Because the cactus is like a parrot that repeats things whenever it gets a certain cue. Whenever Pearl, Garnet, or Amethyst says something to it, it says something about Pearl, Garnet, or Amethyst.
Steven, we'll help you.
I can't tell Pearl how I feel because she'll blame herself.
Give up! You can't win this fight!
I don't want any more high and mighty advice from Garnet.
Make attack!
I'm still sick of Amethyst acting like she's so mature now.
It was even shown to repeat Steven's words and actions depending on what was said.
Hey, Pearl, you have to see this.
Hey, Pearl?
Would you be surprised if a parrot said, "Polly want a cracker" to you when you hold up one to its face?
Why does Smoky Quartz suddenly gain the ability to slow down time for everyone except them, despite neither Amethyst nor Steven showcasing this ability or even anything resembling it before?
As I said, I agree with that, but that's one of the 4 examples you provided so far.
While I am the person asking these questions, I also know the answer to them, and that is because it's most convenient for the plot. Why can't Steven stop the Rejuvenator despite being a diamond? Because it's most convenient for the plot.
Sure, that's the only reason. Well, anyway, I'm skipping the next few minutes because after this, Kross brings up how the show is fast-pacing, makes it difficult to keep track of the character's development, and while I agree with that point on its own, I have an issue with one of the examples he uses.
I've got better things to do.
Steven's pink Super Saiyan form comes out of nowhere and it gives him multiple new powers that either don't make sense or are very much in contrast to his existing ones. Steven is a healer, he's defensive, he doesn't fight unless absolutely necessary, and even then he doesn't feel good about it. So why exactly does Steven's new form grant him a power wave ability which is very clearly capable of, if not straight up designed to deal damage?
He's gone!
She had a scream that could crack the walls.
Sure, the Super Saiyan form could have been introduced in a better way, I won't deny that, but saying that it comes out of nowhere isn't exactly true, since the finale did show that Steven had this type of power deep inside him. Though even if we ignore that, your footage shows Steven running away from Jasper and dodging her attacks. Even when he beat up Jasper in the Super Saiyan form, he didn't feel good about it.
I don't know what that was. I'm sorry.
So where's the inconsistency with this character? Are you trying to argue it's inconsistent for him to have these powers at all? Because Steven had super strength in the original series. If he was always meant to be a pacifist healer, then why would he need that?
I got a specific type of comment in my last Steven Universe Future video a lot, and it goes something along the lines of, well, of course Steven is strong, he's a diamond, or, well, of course Steven yelled at volleyball, he doesn't like being compared to Pink, or whatever else people had a problem with. And to prevent the same thing from happening to this video, I'd like to take a moment to explain why I don't consider this to be a very good argument. Like I mentioned before, many of the issues I have with this show stem from its insistence on introducing plot points with no setup and using them to jerk the episode around like my dog when I'm trying to play tug of war with him. I get that Steven doesn't like being compared to Pink. I get that Steven is a diamond. I get that he is a vegetarian. All of this makes sense, but it feels unnatural when it comes so out of nowhere, and it tells me that the writers are willing to discard anything I think I know about these characters in this world if it means progressing the plot.
Well, the problem with that argument is that a majority of the examples you brought up did have setup, whether it be from the original series or the episode itself. Sure, that doesn't mean it was set up well, and I'd agree with you that it's not in places, but criticizing the pacing is one thing. Ignoring details and acting like there was no build-up at all is another, since at that point it comes off like you're criticizing the show for a different problem that it doesn't have. Especially since in your last video, you weren't framing this as a pacing issue, you were framing this as an issue with the show not explaining things.
This is made even worse by the fact that his new powers go completely unexplained. I don't know what the scene with him turning pink in front of Rose's other pearl was supposed to imply, but all it accomplished was confusing me and throwing a wrench into this new ability. Giving Steven outbursts of anger would have clearly led up to this moment naturally, and it would have been the easiest thing in the world to do.
So yeah, you can't really blame people for bringing up the stuff you ignored to make a point. That's not how this works. So after this, he makes some agreeable points about the show's developmental process, so I'll just head to my final thoughts. But before I go on, I want to say that I don't think Kross's second rant was that bad. I may have had some problems with it, but he conveyed his points in a more civil manner despite the clickbaity thumbnail, and was able to expand on them in a way where I could at least see where he was coming from. His first rant is where a lot of my ire lied, and I think that has something to do with the fact that Kross admitted to rushing it out in the description. And to be honest, it shows. Not only is it a lot more antagonistic, but if his overall point was that the show had poor pacing, then it was not conveyed well at all due to the numerous times where he claimed that the details either didn't exist or were never built up. And I think some of that also might have had to do with this.
Once I decide that I don't like a show anymore, I begin to enjoy it ironically. I begin to make fun of it, for lack of a better term, because how else am I supposed to derive enjoyment from it?
Don't get me wrong, I understand watching a show just to riff on it. That's essentially why a lot of negative, angry reviewers got popular. However, if you're going to make a critical analysis on it, then going into a show expecting to hate it runs the risk of glancing over details or not putting much thought into your analysis because, it sucks, I know what I'm talking about. I'm not saying that you should be forced to like the show or anything, but if you're going to make another video on it, I recommend putting in the level of thought and care you put into your second rant. Anyways, that's all I have to say, and I hope you all enjoyed the video.